Newsmax is real news for real people.
Is attorney and Republican strategist Erin Elmore, Project 21 National Advisory Board member and radio host Christopher Arps, and constitutional law attorney, former prosecutor and Newsmax contributor Amir Benno. Good morning.
I just want to say a number: 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July.
You first. Shouldn't the administration actually be focused on the 8.5% instead of somehow claiming it's 0%? I mean, and whether you're talking about exact numbers or not, again, it becomes semantics at this point. Shouldn't the administration simply be focused on lowering costs for the American people?
Right. And you hit the nail on the head there, because the average American goes to the grocery store and they can barely make ends meet. They go to the gas station and the pain at the pump is real. And then they hear a president go on television and brag and boast that he's lowered gas prices and that inflation is at 0%. And honestly, people have had enough of this. They say the president is touting all of these accomplishments and we can barely make ends meet. And I think that's what's going to drive people to the polls in November, are these kitchen table issues. Also, if you want to factor in the open borders and how our communities are being flooded and overwhelmed, and that in school our children are being taught all sorts of gender identity as opposed to math and science and reading. These are the issues the American people care about. And when they see people in Washington like President Biden or Nancy Pelosi saying that China isn't communist and it's one of the great democracies in the world, the American people are scratching their head, and they're going to take that confusion to the polls and probably vote for a lot of Republicans. We've seen it in Wisconsin. We've seen it in Connecticut. We've seen it in Vermont. We've seen it all across the country, and it's not going to stop because they keep lying.
Yeah, it's in terms of, spinning facts, so to speak, and also what are the priorities? As Erin pointed out, Chris, food prices still through the roof. I mean, Americans experience this every single day. Let's move on to the hot topic of the week, beyond inflation. Erin, I want to get to that raid, of course, of former President Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. Now, the left-wing media really struggling out, speaking of wording, to figure out if they should call this a raid or not. Take a listen.
Agents, by the way, don't like the word raid. They don't like it. It sounds like it's some kind of, extrajudicial, non-legal thing. They want to say they executed a search warrant, all of that going on, meticulous searching. I've seen situations where devices, electronic devices, thumb drives.
Yeah, the key phrase there, the word raid sounds like. Well, if you even look up the definition, I mean, a quick Google there is pretty clear. There were lights, tons of police cars. This wasn't a polite knock on the door. Hi, we have a search warrant. So Amir, if the FBI actually, Erin, I want you to react to that.
So you go at pre-dawn to Mar-a-Lago with 30 armed officers and start going through Melania's clothes. It's a raid. And hear me out here. Under the Fourth Amendment, that's what protects our right to unlawful search and seizures. It needs to be probable cause that a crime has been committed and precisely say the place to be searched and the thing to be seized. President Trump hasn't been there since Memorial Day. This probable cause has to be fresh. What haven't they had? They had plenty of time. President Trump was working with the FBI for 9 months. When the FBI got there, they asked that the security cameras be turned off. That is a raid. That is unconstitutional. There are so many problems with this. Why would they not let Trump's lawyers touch and feel and see the warrant? Why would they not let Trump's lawyers follow them? Because that would protect them from planting evidence. This is honestly really scary. I could go on and on. The judge that authorized the warrant had pre his being appointed as a judge or running for judge, he had anti-Trump comments on his Facebook page. He recused himself from another case involving Trump and Hillary Clinton. Amir can add to what I'm saying here, but there are so many problems surrounding this raid, surrounding this search and seizure, surrounding the constitutionality. It is absolutely staggering and terrifying for our democracy that we live in as Americans in a free country.
Yeah, Amir, I'm going to let you pick up where Erin left off.
Excuse me. Well, look, we don't know enough yet. I mean, in a few days, we'll get the warrant return, which is going to say what was actually a listing of what was taken during this. And hopefully we'll be able to see ultimately the affidavit that went to support this, the application for the warrant. And then we'll have
All right, Amir, Erin, and Chris, we'll see you at the top of next hour. Thanks for waking up early and lots more to discuss. Thanks. Joining me this morning on our panel, attorney and Republican strategist Erin Elmore. Former President Trump says he took the fifth when he was questioned from New York by New York Attorney General Letitia James over his business dealings. Amir, to you first. I mean, we often hear the phrase, I will plead the fifth. Explain what this actually means, but also what this could mean for former President Trump and also for Attorney General James and her investigation.
So this is a civil proceeding that's looking into certain allegations of wrongdoing regarding taxes and overvaluing property values or undervaluing them to get some sort of tax advantage. And so the Attorney General has deposed the president, which means that ask questions to the president under oath.
So, an attorney. And, you know, it was interesting because all of the left-wing and mainstream media outlets, or most of them yesterday, were showing clips of former President Trump saying that only a mobster would plead the fifth. Then you would only plead the fifth if you're guilty of something. So they had a field day with that. But what they overlooked was that former President Trump explained the fact that he took the fifth. He said, listen, I always thought you only do this if you're guilty. But based on the attacks that I have been under this past week, I realized this is something I have to do. So, Erin, your interpretation of former President Trump deciding to, quote unquote, take the fifth.
I mean, I think Amir did an excellent job explaining this from the legal perspective, but from the practicals perspective, we saw what happened last week at Mar-a-Lago. We see that we're barely living in America. This looks more like Venezuela, Russia, Cuba, where we are going after a former president at his home at a dawn raid. No wonder President Trump didn't feel comfortable speaking with Letitia James, who is a political opportunist seeking to advance her career at any cost, who has a personal vendetta against President Trump. Sure, President Trump in the past may have made certain comments, but our world and our universe and our country has changed drastically in the last 2 years. And people like Letitia James and those that are the talking heads on CNN have terrible Trump derangement syndrome, and they want to do anything and everything that they can to take this man down. So if I were advising President Trump, if Amir were advising President Trump, I bet you we would have advised him to do the exact same thing. Protect yourself in this civil matter from these political sharks who are trying to hurt you and harm you.
Yeah, Erin, that's a great point. Former President Trump did say that he took the advice of his lawyer. So, Chris, Trump...
There are some reports that your son was on this trip with you.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
What was his role?
His role was to be my escort. Usually we invited spouses. Not all could come, that I had him come, and I was very proud that he was there, and I'm thrilled, and it was nice for me.
Well, when you look into this further, it's clear that Paul Pelosi Jr., they call him the Fresh Prince of San Fran. He has all kinds of business dealings over there. He almost makes Hunter Biden look like a JV squad member. I mean, honestly, these politicians on the left are such political opportunists, and their children and their family members and their spouses are just picking up the scraps along the way, making them very, very, very rich. And I tell you what, this is a massive double standard. Because if this were happening with the Trump children, there would be indictments and lawsuits and hearings and depositions and criminalizations. And honestly, it's so sad and so pathetic what has become of our American politicians. Our founding fathers should be rolling over in their graves. When they went to Washington, they went for a few years to help our country and then went back to their jobs. Now people go to Washington to get rich and grift off of other countries in our system. It's truly sad. And I think we need a massive reformation of our political process here in the United States.
Yeah, and Amir, you know, we're just talking about Speaker Pelosi's son there, but what she didn't discuss, she hasn't been very direct when it came to her husband's DUI charge. Now, Paul Pelosi did plead not guilty.
Back to Nancy Pelosi and her son, I mean, how can you blame them for being as brazen as they are to have him going along on those trips when we see what's happened with Hunter Biden, where he has gotten away with what he's done, and then even with Paul Pelosi, her husband. I mean, we have yet to see the surveillance video or the dash cam video from his DUI.
That's right.
So these people think that they have a set of rules that they only apply to them, and we see that time and time again.
It definitely
and
seems
that's
like
true, by the way, because the mainstream media isn't showing any of this. They're not showing Hunter Biden, who's under criminal investigation, getting on Air Force One. They are going to get away with it because what can we do? The American people, our hands are completely tied. We don't have any help in Washington. We don't have any allies in the press other than Newsmax, thank God. There is no accountability anymore. I think that people like Pelosi and Biden are doing this on purpose to say, we are above the law. This is no longer a democratic republic. We can do whatever we want because people on the left will back us and stand for us, and the mainstream media will let us get away with anything that we want. We should be scared for our democracy right now, right here in America with this kind of behavior.
All right. It definitely seems like a clear double standard. Erin, Chris, and Amir, I really appreciate all of your insights and expertise. Thanks so much. This morning, our panel, attorney and Republican strategist Erin Elmore, Project 21 National Advisory Board member and radio host Christopher Arps, and constitutional law attorney, former prosecutor, and Newsmax contributor Amir Benno, the ultimate multi-hyphenate, Amir Benno. All right, welcome back, panel. All right, so here is what we have learned. The federal magistrate, Bruce Reinhart, who was once linked to Jeffrey Epstein and donated to former President Obama, allegedly signed off on that search warrant. Now, Newsmax host John Bachman interviewed him years ago when he defended an IRS official. Let's take a listen to that.
Incompetence doesn't necessarily lead to criminality. So
it's again, I think, too soon to tell whether or not there was probable cause for him to do it. And so we can look into his background, but, you know, judges come from having practiced oftentimes. And when you practice, you represent a variety of different clients, and those clients may be savory or unsavory. And we have to just be careful not to attribute to a particular judge or a particular attorney certain attributes of the clients that they represented in the past. So I'm going to hold judgment on the judges signing off on this warrant until we know more information.
Well said. Go ahead, Erin. You had something to say.
I'm definitely going to disagree. I mean, I agree with Amir that we do need to see what the probable cause looks like, but there could be a judicial ethics complaint here because this judge did go on social media and say negative things about President Trump. He probably should have recused himself, but perhaps his feet were still held to the fire politically. This is wrong. We have a judge that already recused himself when there was a lawsuit between Trump and Hillary that is still pending. So honestly, he should have done the right thing here and said, I've known that I've said bad things about President Trump. I'm not equipped to speak on this matter. And I do think that there are judicial ethics concerns at play here. And although there may or may not be probable cause, of course, Amir is 100% white. We do not know, but his character and his morality and his judicial responsibility are definitely in question.